Welcome back to the Vital Mentality podcast. I'm your host, Angel Monroe. We're talking all things health and wellness, and we're looking at ways to live a vital life. So, short disclaimer, this is not intended as medical advice. This is just for general purposes only. Today, we're going to look at zinc. It is a mineral that's essential, and lots of people end up being deficient in it, and deficiencies in this mineral can lead to serious health conditions. But there is problems with the way that we fix this. And so we're going to have a look at those. We're going to have a look at what zinc does, look at the deficiencies and conditions, how it's tested, or how you can work out that you got a deficiency, how supplements are made, how zinc supplements are made, and some solutions. So I'm a clinical nutritionist or naturopathic nutritionist, and I was, like functional medicine doctors and naturopaths, trained to prescribe lab-made supplements, singular supplements. And another name for supplements is nutraceuticals. And in my opinion, they are very similar to pharmaceuticals, and they're made often in the same factories. And after years of practicing, I have learnt that it is not necessarily the way to go. And you may have heard me criticize Western medicine before, but I do have criticism for modern day natural medicine also. And you may be listening to this and think, oh, but I take zinc supplements and they've helped me immensely. And I'm not saying actually that taking a singular lab-made supplement won't have an effect in the body, like a pharmaceutical will have an effect in the body. But my problem is that there are downsides to doing it this way, and my motivation is always to find the way that has the least or no downsides to health, which is completely possible. So just to set the tone, I want to read a little chapter. This is out of the book called Cancer and the New Biology of Water. It's by Dr. Thomas Cowan, and it's just talking about what makes up a carrot. I think it's applicable in this story. So any chemist, or for that matter, any oncologist, would tell you that the substance that constitutes a carrot is the entirety of the carrot. Now imagine that you called up the local chemical supply company and ordered the same number of atoms in the identical ratio that made up a carrot and had it delivered to your house. You open up the box and you pour it onto your cutting board. Is it a carrot? This heap of atoms clearly has the substances that make up a carrot. We're told by modern science that the substance is all that exists. So if the substance is there, it should be a carrot. Does it have the same taste as a carrot, the same smell, the same nutrition? If you did the same analysis for a beet and came out with slightly different numbers and ratios for the beet as opposed to the carrot, is the sole difference between a carrot and a beet to be found in the different composition of nutrients? My guess is that most people reading this are quite sure that the heap of atoms constituting the substance of a carrot is not the same thing as a carrot. In fact, I would venture to say that most people reading this would agree that the heap of atoms are missing the very thing that makes a carrot, a plant worthy of our care and attention, because it is distinct, knowable, and valuable to us. Anyway, it goes on, but you get the picture. We have this reductionist approach to trying to separate something from the whole, hoping that it's just this one tiny little bit of a whole that is going to be the magic bullet for our health. And I guess my argument is that you can't separate a tiny thing from a whole and expect it to be sufficient, because, you know, like I've said many times before, we're nature, our body understands nature. And as soon as you introduce things that are separate from nature, the body has to struggle to process that. So let's have a look at zinc. So zinc is involved in more enzymatic reactions than any other mineral in the body. So think of any function, any reaction in the body, well, not every single one, but certainly zinc is involved in many of them. So it's a cofactor for a lot of these reactions, including for the production, storage, and function of insulin. So really important for our metabolism. It's integral for growth and development. Normal immune function, I often don't like, I never like to use the word immune, but I think it's appropriate as a colloquial term, but I much prefer detox and regeneration. I think that's much more closer to what is going on rather than that we're fighting against nature. It's integral for our gastrointestinal structure and function throughout the gastrointestinal systems, our gut, our large and small intestine. It is incredibly important for neurological function. There is a term, no zinc, no think. For fertility, most kind of facets of fertility, especially for men, but also for women, for libido, for prostate health, for sperm quality, erectile function, for pregnancy and lactation. It is a real integral part of the expression of life. It is a major component of one of our most powerful antioxidants, superoxide dismutase and metallothionein. Like I said, glycemic control and insulin. It's needed for protein and DNA synthesis. Have a few problems with DNA. That's for another day. But for sure, zinc is integral for our protein synthesis and expression in what makes us in our cells and our tissues. It is essential for wound healing and for skin. And it is also integral for taste and smell perception. So for things that end up being deficiencies, so you can see this in impaired growth, emotional disorders, anorexia, hair loss, and alopecia, diarrhea, changes to the microvilli in the intestine, skin health, so often teens with acne, there's often an underlying zinc deficiency, sexual development and delay in children and teens, impaired gonad growth and sperm production, impotence, prostate health, and some conditions that are related are things like ADHD, which I spoke about the other week, tinnitus, warts, herpes, acne, wound healing, male infertility, impotence, depression, diarrhea, and some of the gut diseases like celiac and Crohn's. So things that increase demand are alcoholism, because it damages the gut. NSAIDs, so non-steroidal anti-inflammatory, also damages the gut. Diuretics and antibiotics as well increase demand and inhibit our uptake. Heavy metal toxicity, anorexia, traumatic wounds and burns, low birth weight, high fiber diets, pregnancy, liver disease, and pancreatic disease all increase our demand for zinc. Vegetarians often need possibly 50% more zinc than someone that eats meat. Zinc binds to protein, so protein's really essential for how much we're uptaking, but also because of the sources. So the sources for natural sources for zinc are seafood, mostly shellfish, oysters, things like crab, lobster, oysters, red meat, and then grains and legumes. But grains and legumes have phytates, so they're kind of anti-nutrients for zinc. So that's why vegetarians generally need 50% more intake of dietary zinc because of those factors. But you can soak and ferment and sprout. I'll talk about that more. to get rid of the phytate. So it becomes more bioavailable. Egg yolk is another source. So the way that you can find out that you have a zinc deficiency or not is actually very difficult. Blood assays, they lack sensitivity. Functional medicine practitioners and naturopaths and nutritionists will look at hair, nails, saliva, and sometimes even look at looking from functional labs. They'll look at blood, so white and red blood cells and platelets, but all of that is a little bit unreliable. There's no gold standard for measuring zinc deficiency. But for me personally, I never bother testing it. I think that you can get it from doing a really good analysis, like spending a good hour with someone, and you look at their medical history, family history, diet, lifestyle, environmental factors, good diet diary, and look at all the things that could be increasing demand. And then you look at their symptoms and you can tell whether someone is deficient in zinc or not. Like I mentioned, all of those conditions, which are incredibly broad. So if someone's got gut health issues, say, and then they've also got ADHD, and you look at the diet and they're not getting any zinc, I mean, you can safely say that they have a zinc deficiency. One of the reasons why people, especially in Western medicine and also naturopathy and functional medicine, and nutrition, why they would try and work out whether there was a deficiency through pathological testing or serology, is because that when you take it in supplemental, lab-made supplemental form, that there is a toxicity, and there's no toxicity in zinc when you have it natural, like from a whole food supplement form or from a food form. Absolutely no toxicity level. But when you're taking it from a supplement, traditional supplement, there is toxicity. So if you're not treating it like that, then there isn't a risk in terms of whether or not you've got a test result or not. And like I said, you can't actually get a solid test result for zinc deficiency anyway. We're going to keep on talking about zinc, but I just want to interject for a second and talk about the 6 principles of a naturopath or a nutritionist that we kind of pledge. So first is the healing power of nature. Second is first do no harm. Third is treat the whole person. 4 is treat the cause. Then naturopath as teacher, and finally prevention. So the first principle there was the healing power of nature. And I'm now going to talk about how zinc is actually made. And so you can see how that actually doesn't fit into the naturopathic principles to treat, in my opinion, with a nutraceutical like zinc that you would buy from a chemist or a natural medicine dispensary. So how they make zinc is they basically get zinc ore, the rock, just trying to find where I've written it down. They get a rock of zinc ore, and they use sulfuric acid, which is a toxic corrosive chemical, and that's how they take it out. That's what you get, zinc oxide. So it doesn't matter if the zinc is going to be used for ceramics or sunscreen or any industrial uses or a supplement. This is the initial way to get zinc. So I just think that there is some disconnect in this idea of, when we're thinking about naturopathic principles, that where the first thing is the healing power of nature. And then as our treatment, we're giving zinc that we've chemically extracted from a rock to try and heal the body. It doesn't make sense to me. So when you take zinc in this way, it interferes with iron, it interferes with copper, magnesium, and calcium. And so you often find that it is, practitioners will say to take it away from those supplements if you're having them. And generally they will have to prescribe, if you're on zinc for a long time, they'll have to prescribe these other things too, because of the risk is so great that you'll become deficient in those things. And like I said before, there is a risk of toxicity as well. And when it's from food or a whole food supplement source, there is no risk of that. There is no risk of interacting with those nutrients as well. And in fact, in whole food form, it usually has iron, iodine, and what else? And copper in natural sources. There was another example that I wanted to give that doesn't relate to zinc at all. This is beta carotene, and they did some studies on beta carotene because, carrots are thought to be anti-carcinogenic, so to prevent cancer or to heal from cancer. And when they did tests on beta carotene, the chemical that had been extracted from the carrot, like I've read that passage before, people that took beta carotene, if they've ever smoked, even had a cigarette once in their life, and they took beta carotene, their risk of getting lung cancer went up exponentially. I can't remember the exact numbers, but you get the picture. It's like, so if I drank carrot juice every day, it would be protective. But if I smoke one cigarette in my life, which probably most people have, and then take beta carotene, the risk of cancer goes up. So when we try and mess with nature in this way, we try and take the atoms away, the individual chemicals away of whole substances, we get into trouble. And definitely that happens with zinc supplementation. And like I said, I think in the start of the conversation, I mean, I've in the past took 6 zinc supplements, and you can have a positive effect or a cessation of symptoms, but it doesn't mean that you haven't caused another problem. And it doesn't necessarily mean you've got to the root of the problem either. So yeah, when we look at zinc, where it's absorbed in the jejunum, which is like the middle of the small intestine. So gut health is super important when we're looking at zinc. And also, like I said before, it binds to protein. So protein intake is also a factor. I actually get annoyed at myself when I talk about things from too much of a reductionist point, because I think when you start saying things like protein's really important, people will get busy and then they'll like start taking protein powders or getting obsessed with that one macronutrient, and there's massive problems in doing that as well. I'm talking about from food, and I'm not talking about certain amounts. I'm just saying that needs to be a prominent feature. And like I said before, that with vegetarians, so just trying to remember where I was, with vegetarians, that there is a risk of not getting enough zinc. And so I think eating eggs is really important because egg yolks have a certain amount of zinc, and you just soak your soak your grains, soak your legumes, you soak them, and then you tip out the liquid that you've soaked it in. It's about 8 hours has been proven to reduce the amount of phytic acid, say in like legumes like lentils or chickpeas, and make them bioavailable. So it's really not that difficult. It just requires a bit more of an effort. So if I know that I'm going to eat rice or lentils that night, I'll put them on to soak in the morning. Then I get home, I rinse them with filtered water and start again. So yeah, it's a small effort. And even things like eating sourdough bread makes a really big difference as well. In terms of supplementing, which I think, like I mentioned before, or the massive amount of conditions that can occur from zinc deficiency, sometimes you need a little bit of extra help. And I love Oyster Max. I sell it on the website. It has zinc, copper, iodine, selenium, B12, and it's all of these accessory nutrients because it's in its whole form. It's just powdered oysters. That the synergy of this whole food is what makes it so powerful. And rather than fighting with those nutrients that happens if you take regular zinc supplementation, you're actually getting them as well. I think 4 capsules of Oyster Max is equivalent to a whole kilogram of steak. So if people are vegetarian or I've got the pen. If people are vegetarian or if they just don't eat a lot of red meat and don't eat a lot of oysters, I mean, it's very difficult to get that therapeutic dose, which you can actually get out of that. And there's other companies that are doing using oysters as a whole food supplement as well, because that really is superior. So other factors that you need to think about, because, obviously there's a reason why we got there in the first place if there's a deficiency. So looking after gut health is really important. When people have that intestinal permeability, or leaky gut, that's when the cells you basically get holes in the wall of the gut and you get a loss of minerals, and it's leaky gut is an underlying cause for a whole lot of conditions, including things like ADHD and depression and lots of other gut health and allergies and stuff. So and for zinc deficiency, but it also, having enough zinc means that you don't get leaky gut. So making sure you get enough zinc is something that will help you keep replete in zinc, but also things like looking at bone broths and gelatin rich foods as well for gut health, fermented foods for gut health, organic foods, because pesticides ruin the gut. It's one of the reasons why people are deficient in minerals, is because we're eating food that degrades the gut, and then we can't uptake the nutrients that we're trying to get out of the food. Also eating seasonal local food, finding farmers that practice regenerative farming, because they're going to have the minerals in the soil. They're using the waste from growing the food, so all the extra leaves and things goes back into the compost, goes back into the soil, and we get those minerals back. And so super important. The more that we support those growers, the more that collectively we're more replete in minerals. It's super important. And, I think if everyone starts at a small scale doing that, we'll have a huge improvement in that area. Like I said, soaking and sprouting, even nuts as well. I've got to admit, I'm lazy with the nuts. With having, so that's why you'll see activated nuts. So someone would soak them and then cook them again or rehydrate them to get them crispy again. But yeah, I'm lazy in that department. But definitely with the grains and the legumes, I find that very easy to do. Looking after the liver, because when a liver is impaired, it's not going to uptake minerals as well. So bitter leafy greens, dandelion teas, coriander, making sure we don't have an overload of heavy metals, because when we have too many heavy metals, we have a higher need for minerals. So drinking water is a major source. Our environment, what our houses are made out of, all that kind of thing. And pharmaceuticals as well, being really conscientious about how much we're taking them, because I mentioned previously things like non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, diuretics and antibiotics affect our uptake. I think that is it for zinc today. And I hope that I also made a case for whole food supplementation that extends past zinc, because it's definitely a bigger conversation, but I do intend to talk about it in relation to other minerals as well. So as always, thank you for listening, and we'll talk again soon.